They concerned more about the entertainment value of a story than the value it adds? Or is it what we've read, or is it that what we read, see and hear on the news is merely a reflection of our tastes? And while politicians may be immune from prosecution for what they say in the precincts of parliament, is the media which broadcasts these statements immune themselves? Outside the legality of it all, what are the professional requirements? Join me and my eminent panel in taking that conversation forward by sending your thoughts to NTV Kenya at Burrows and at PressPassKE. The hashtag is PressPass. Now let's take a look at what we've lined up for you.
But this is a media report.
Nah.
This is a media report.
Go to the photos. Next is photos.
About William Ruto, talking all the time about William Ruto, he should stop and focus on us.
How has the Kenyan media performed in determining the truth of political statements? Or has it simply become a case of he said, she said?
Kuambia media, any clip ambaye watakuwa jaribu kuambia media, any clip ambaye watakuwa wanasiasa wanafanya, watuwekee.
Come on, wake up, come to us. Let us tell you if these people are worth it or not.
This week on Press Pass, we ask, has the Kenyan media held the political class to account for the claims they make? The man on the street starts us off with his thoughts on how well the media has done in holding politicians accountable for the statements they make.
Kuambia media, any clip ambaye watakuwa wanasiasa wanafanya, watuwekee. Alafu after down the line watakuwa wanatumia hii clip wakirifaa kwa ile promises ambaye walikuwa wamesema. Kama kuna mheshimiwa alikuwa amesema kwamba atakuja kusaidia ama kusema kujenga barabara, inawezekana down the line kama after 1 year ukuje kuonyesha the same clip. Ndio itamfanya huyo mheshimiwa akuwa accountable na ile maneno ambaye atasema.
Media anakava saa ile watu wameanza kuwa na commotion. The time yenye commotion imetokea, media inakuja kuenforce, unapata wanauliza maswali watu, lakini baada hiyo wafuatilie hata yenye wakubwa wamesema, wanasiasa wamesema. Baada hapo hata media yenyewe wakimaliza wanaenda kufuata issues. They don't follow up.
I agree that the media has played a major role in keeping the politicians on check. One, by informing Wanjiko what the politicians are doing. Because if we didn't have this platform for us to know what they are doing, they could do anything that they want.
They need to bring the culprits to the book. They need to push what is supposed to be pushed to the end. They don't have to be puppets of the politicians.
What happens with the media may hear those events properly, the promises and everything. The problem is they don't follow. When let's say they can hear just one item, probably something has cropped up, some corruption skirmishes have come up, then they forget about what the politician promised.
Come on, wake up, come to us. Let us tell you if these people are worth it or not. Because you should know from us, kama tunaendelea ama tuendelee.
For sure, the media on the other side of Mudavadi, the media has been doing well. Because Mudavadi has been very flexible, very open, and more so is very approachable. But unfortunately, we have got a problem with the DP whereby he's not accessible and he cannot be assessed to respond to these allegations.
Hata Mudavadi akiongea bila media, Mudavadi hawezi fanya kitu. Wewe unaonaje mawazo yako? Mimi kwa mawazo yangu nilikuwa ningeomba media wasidi kuleta information bila kuogopa mtu yoyote, anywhere, mali popote wanasiasa wanaenda, watu wa media wasidi kuenda bila kukatazwa ama bila kusuiliwa.
Well, given the situation on our roads today, I'm glad that at least 3/4 of our panel could make it. That is with the exception of Julie Masiga, who unfortunately, due to the situation, was unable to make it. But hopefully when she gets home, she will tune in and share her thoughts on Twitter or Facebook, which I hope you will too. Now, my guests tonight are Macharia Gaido, who I don't think requires much of an introduction. On his Twitter handle, he describes himself as a comforter of the afflicted and afflicter of the comfortable. More formally, he is a former managing editor, special projects for the Daily Nation, but he still writes commentary for the newspaper. Next to him is Seku Otieno, who is the head of, yes?
Seku Owino.
Owino, yes, I'm so sorry. Owino, yes. Who is the head of the Nation Media Group Legal Affairs Department, and most recently penned All the Laws of Fire and the story of Bureau Boys Academic Bonfire. I think that was published in the Sunday Nation.
Yesterday, yeah.
Okay. Seku Owino there. And next to him is David Omoyo, who is the CEO and Secretary to the Media Council of Kenya. Thank you very much for being here, gentlemen, and for making the time. So I think in the interest of 2/3, I will be the female representative on the panel. Now, I'd like to get your reactions on those vox pops. And you can tell from them, people didn't quite understand what it is we're looking for. It's a bit of a technical subject, in that we are asking what the journalist handbook dictates when we're covering statements made by politicians. And Seku, of course, will be addressing the legality of some of the statements that have been made. But before we discuss those vox pops, I'd like at least to set the stage with some statements that have been made by politicians with regard to the May scandal.
3 members of parliament from North Rift region are now accusing Deputy President William Ruto and his allies of being behind the woes facing maize farmers.
Tukasema ni nani alileta mbolea ama fertilizer ambaye ni ushi ama ni fake.
Jubilee legislators allied to Deputy President William Ruto have defended him against allegations of involvement in the maize scandal.
The 3 are not mercenaries for hire who ply their trade by intimidating institutions while speaking for entrepreneurs.
Okay, gentlemen, those were stories that were carried by KTN and Citizen that we've aired, but also NTV, where we are now, K24 as well. Even the newspapers covered these particular stories. We had the perceived rebel MPs from the Rift Valley saying Deputy President William Ruto needs to be investigated. Then we had the perceived loyalists come back and say these people are funded by cartels who are looking for fertilizer tenders. Macharia, actually, let me start with Seku. Have we opened ourselves up to the libel laws?
Yes, we have, in several respects. I think we need to remember that even as we cover all these things, we have some obligations towards the people we cover and the people in respect of whom we do this business in terms of reporting news. We owe the people we cover to be fair, and we owe our publics or our audiences the responsibility of giving them accurate information. So whenever a claim of that kind is set up, we have a responsibility to ensure that we are not only fanning a rumor mill, but that we ourselves are refining it and are standing on ground as to what the factual situation is, particularly knowing that claims will be made, but the reliance on us as a platform for information is that nobody comes to us to give them rumors, because then we are not professional. So some of those statements would be worrisome in the sense that if all somebody needs to do is to call a press conference and make a statement, and then we go ahead and broadcast it or we publish it in some of those respects, if we are challenged, we may be in a fairly difficult problem. Legally speaking, because of the way things are, the common law to which Kenya applies presupposes that everybody has a good reputation. So if you're making a statement that is going to injure somebody's reputation or cause him to be thought of less, in a less esteemed way, then you're getting yourself into a fairly risky situation should the person decide to sue you or to seek legal redress. So yes, some of those statements are dangerous.
Are dangerous.
Yes.
Okay, Macharia, you've been in the position where, I don't know, did you two work at the same time?
Oh, yes.
Macharia would call up and say,
we had our conflicts.
Should we run this or not? But in the position of somebody who's making the decision of whether to carry a story or not, is giving somebody the right to reply enough?
Legally, it is not enough. But sometimes, from a purely editorial viewpoint, you may decide to take certain liberties. A lot of allegations will be made outside what you might call protected space, which is outside the courts or outside the chambers of parliament. So we always tread a very thin ground on what claims and allegations can we report. And sometimes we'll take some risks because public interest, maize is a public interest. But those allegations, we don't know. But we need, beyond the legal risk, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our readers to go a bit further and interrogate those allegations. Ask the people making those claims, what evidence do you have that the deputy president deals in maize and fertilizer and so on? What evidence do you have that this man making those claims has been paid to do so, or has been, or is a drug importer? Or, you know, all kinds of things are coming up, some of them very dirty. But I think we owe it to our readers to go further. First of all, ask for evidence. Secondly, initiate our own investigations and find out what we can uncover.
Okay. You say protected. You talked about parliament precincts being protected, and you talked about what he said in the courts.
No, not just the precincts. Inside the chambers,
inside
in the course
the chambers of parliament,
or a committee room.
Okay.
Not in the restaurant or some place like that.
All right.
Yeah.
But are we protected as the media if we broadcast what is said within those spaces?
Absolutely.
We are?
We are.
Okay, is that the position?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So what the loyalist said, but that was in the press briefing room, so that was not protected.
That is not protected.
That is not protected.
That is not protected.
Okay. David, what is the standard then?
I think we are beyond standards in this matter. Of course, while anybody can take the media to court, the question is it the media who said it, or someone who came to the media and said it, and it is a public figure who has said something and they can be followed. But what we have now is a matter that is beyond the code of conduct, beyond the law, to a level of professionalism and personal conviction. They say that if you have two people, one person says it is raining outside, and another person says it's not raining outside. We have the media where it's at that level. So one person says it's raining, you give them 5 minutes of shame to say it's raining. Then the other person says it's not raining, you give them their 5 minutes to say it's not raining, and then say we are balanced. I think the work of the media is to
look out the window,
look out and say, is it raining or not? So if people make allegations about maize and all that, it's not about these are said and this one has denied. We need to go deeper and research that. And that takes us into the context of the he said, she said thing that has really literally messed our journalism until even the viewers, you said, they think just give us the politics and all that. We want to see what the politicians are doing. We know it doesn't add value. Like when one person says and calls the other a thief, another says, I am not a thief. And then another one says, this one gives money. The other says, I haven't given money and all that. It is the duty to go deeper and investigate that. So what we are saying is just several factors that, you know, the code of conduct is very simple. Be balanced and ensure fair coverage and give voices to each parties. But is it, were you giving airtime for the sake of giving it? Why don't you dig deep and find, is it relevant? So we have that crisis where we suddenly want to say, oh, the media did their job, or they did not do their job. Yet it's about deciding to set the agenda and not just reporting what I would call just instance reporting, episodic reporting. He has said, they have said. Nobody contextualizes how Kutunya stood up to say someone imported maize and all that. You just say he has said, and the story is done. So the next day you look for a Ruto loyalist and they say he has not said, and that is all. We do an entire disservice to the consumers of media services, that we are not giving them any background who this is, when this fertilizer scandal happened, who owns these companies. We simply publish, regurgitate this, put it there, then the right of reply the next day, and run it. And so we are really not moving the discussion forward.
Okay. Yeah. Macharia, what was your assessment of the coverage of this particular story? You're sitting at home, this comes to your attention, or you're flipping through the paper, you read an article on what they said. What went through your mind?
First of all, it is a story that must be told as it is happening. These days, news happens live. When in the newsroom, in the studio, there is no room, sometimes there is no time to start digging into the background before first reporting the immediate happening. So ideally, that will always happen. You will report the immediate happenings. But then you do need to step back, even as those things are happening, to then try and interrogate further, do the analysis. A lot of that is, by the way, is being done in the weekend papers, the Sunday papers particularly. And if anybody who says it is not being done, maybe does not read, but it is being done. Just go back to this Sunday Nation of this past Sunday or the Standard. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of stuff, pages and pages of analysis, background material, and so on and forth. It is always there. Only that people maybe tend to miss it because it is in the middle of the book. But what makes the headlines is the immediate news. When a car bursts into flames outside and kills 5 people, that is what you report immediately. You don't start, first of all, going to check out whether it was insured or whether the tires were in good condition. That obviously comes later. And it's the same thing with this reporting we're doing on politics or maize or all kinds of scandals.
So is it then? So
I said we can do more, we can do better, but I would not say we are failing.
Okay.
We are terribly failing.
All right, Seku, in your conversations, because you have, I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with editors, do you sometimes find that it's more about the shock value of a story, or do you usually find that there's a genuine motivation to get the story out there?
I would say a bit of both. In several instances. The instances where you can actually say, look, this needed to be told in the way in which it was told, because you probably didn't even have, as Sharia has rightly said, you sometimes don't even have the time to continue to check it out. But then in the moment, in the heat of the moment, you report it as it is, and then you go and fact check subsequently. But then there are also instances where you look at it and you say, hey, I wish somebody had checked this a little bit more before we did this. So there's a bit of both in it.
Okay.
Yes.
David, do you agree with Macharia that perhaps those who say that the media does not go in-depth don't read the Sunday papers in the Standard or the Nation?
Well, I agree a bit, but then there's a bit that I disagree. So you're saying that please allow us to give you shallow stuff for 5 days, and if you want more information, you look for us on Sunday. So suppose I'm a media consumer weekdays, and I don't touch these media weekends, I would never get an opportunity to experience that. But beyond that, at what time do we decide as the agenda setting that this topic is of no news value? Because we cannot then decide that any noise being made by any leader will make it to headline news every day, so that this person accuses the other one and they go on, we have the 2022 debate and all that, so that even if we are here before the swearing in of after an election and they say because they are leaders, we can keep covering it. So just beyond the level of, and I appreciate, I've worked in a newsroom, that sometimes you have to break news right away and get the details later. But it can't be the acceptable norm. That please notice that we will break news immediately and we will give you the details and backgrounds later. At some point you may choose, and that has happened in many stories, Macharia will know, where you choose that we can't just break this story can has a lot of ramifications. Let's look for more information. But then again, you over-amplify voices when you allow everybody who knows that I have no facts, let me make noise, I'll get my coverage, my 5 minutes of shame. By the time they're trying to look for their facts, I will have been covered anyway. Mm-hmm. By giving everybody that opportunity, it now makes that then, even if anybody making allegations on a Rift Valley or whichever politician, I have no facts, they will cover me first. They will ask me for facts later. If you use Macharia's theory that break the news first and follow the facts later, it tends to be abused, especially when you have unscrupulous politicians who say, just call a press conference. They know you, they will come. then they will, by the time they ask you for the papers, you'll be live anyway, you will have made your allegations, then you can say they can get the papers later. So it then comes, it's a duty of the journalists to make sure that these guys making the allegations know you will be cornered if you make these allegations anyway.
Okay.
So there's that risk of people knowing that
they can get away with it in the
short
term.
What I would say is this. I think anybody who was in a newsroom knows that out of every one story that gets published, there's another 10 that were never published. So decisions are made, not by one person, but at an editorial conference. There is a lot of stuff. Press conferences, statements, press releases, things said at public rallies, which never see the light of day because it is interrogated and the editors decide, nah, either we completely ignore it or it needs more work, or it needs to be looked into deeper. The other thing is that all this political noise that we cover, it may look like a waste of space, a lot of useless noise, but it is a reflection of something that is happening in the background that could have very major political ramifications at some point or the other, or economic, or security, or anything else. You can't ignore it.
Okay.
So Keter and Kutun and Murkomen may make their noise and insult each other, but we will cover them from the basis that they are not the madman in the market hurling insults and everybody inside. They are representatives of certain political views, of certain political factions, of certain regional or ethnic or whatever groupings. You can't ignore them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. Does it matter then who said it? Because you say we get a lot of press statements, that is very true, we get lots of emails and lots of footage from the field. But if these statements that were made, if these, for example, the statements that were made by the rebels or the loyalists, these particular MPs, were made by some unknown, indescript sort of MCA that we've never heard of, would we carry that?
Let me put it this way. Some of those people speaking, we know that they are mouthpieces for somebody else. If we know somebody is a mouthpiece for the deputy president, he'll probably get more space than the man on the street. If we know somebody is a mouthpiece for Uhuru or Raila or anybody else, we will give him more of a hearing than the nondescript fellow who may be just trying to attract attention. So we weigh these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Seku, do you find that depending on who said what, there is usually a bit more leeway with what can be published? Do we hold some statements made by certain individuals heavier than those made by others? Is that a consideration?
Yes, it is a consideration, and it's a consideration in two respects. One respect is that there's a tendency to consider the person who's made the statement based on, for example, his office. A statement made, say, by a priest, for example, or a bishop, is likely to be treated with a little more, because you would expect in the ordinary course of things that he's not the kind of person who would make a statement that he has not thought through, or whose consequence he does not think, or that he himself is concerned about his reputation in making a reckless statement. That, for example, is it. Than, say, a statement made by a politician. Okay? So office may come in, and therefore with stature. But then there's another one that I have my own checklist based on history, where you say, I tend to get worried about certain people who, on account of their history, tend to make statements that they cannot subsequently follow through with evidence. So yes, you would look at it. And, but when it goes to the courts, in that unlikely event that a statement, you're challenged for a statement, the court doesn't consider who made it.
Okay.
They will ask you, is it true? If you have the evidence, bring it.
All right.
And so you can get into trouble in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, you handle complaints at the Media Council. Do the journalists today require these politicians to substantiate these statements before running with them?
It depends on the nature of the news event. You have a rally and it's live, and some people make these statements. You see, so it's already there. You can't just cancel it. But then if you have someone has issued a press statement and all that, you have the duty, the journalist, to ask for the information there or to come back and research. The problem we have is that they make allegations, and the report we get is that this and this MP has said who and who is responsible. We see it here. And so you realize that that is really opening a window because you amplified, whoever said, the media did not say it, but you have amplified without fact checking. So like if you say someone is involved and they come and say, show me how I was involved, just as Seku said, there will be, why did you broadcast to 1 million people that I'm involved in the maize issue or whatever? So there is that challenge of giving a voice, an unverified voice. And it makes no difference then giving that voice to a madman in the market. Because while we talk about prominence, it need be a prominence person speaking with authority. A local politician or some of the wheeler dealers in the village who happen to be relatives of a senior politician are not necessarily an authority. But if you say, if for example, KEBS or any other police issue a statement, if they say there was a bicycle and it was loaded with 40 people, you say the police have said they are an authority. But by declaring that anybody who is prominent now has spoken and we need to give them a voice, you lose the entire debate completely because you're saying the person who is a neighbor can therefore claim, or the person who is associated with an MCA who is a relative has made a claim. We eventually get to a level where we lose the context, the issue of prominence and the person in authority, such that it's like saying that, you know, a person who sits next or the person whose office is next to the police inspector general's office has said about the accident, and we can't say no because their window has access to the police window, so we are allowing them. So
okay,
we can tend to misuse that thinking of an authority and the relationship between the person saying and the person who is supposed to have done it, and that can cause a lot of eventual confusion.
Okay, we'll get Mashara's response to that when we come back. We'll also be looking back at some interviews that caused ripples this past week, right after this break. me is David Omoyo, who's the CEO and Secretary of the Media Council of Kenya. Next to him is Sekou Wino, who's the Head of Legal Affairs at Nation Media Group. And next to Sekou is Macharia Gaido, who I think requires very little introduction. Former special managing editor, special projects. And also you headed the Kenya Editors Guild at some point. I recall the speech you gave at State House and you talked of briefcases. But we are discussing media coverage of political statements. How much deeper do we go into what we are told, or do we just report exactly as is? So here's some interviews that were conducted in the last 1 to 2 weeks, and we'll hear what our panelists think of how they were handled.
A quick one, just on this. If you want to know the owner of a company or the owner of a farm, because I believe that farm is registered, why do we go to media reports as opposed to, do you have, for example, a search from the registrar of companies indicating that the deputy president owns that?
My brother, as a member of parliament, I have made it very clear that part of the companies that were paid money for innocent farmers today are suffering, is associated with him.
Because William Ruto picked you from dust, my friend, when you were selling maca and made you who you are. You cannot be hard to insult William Ruto and say we are recycling. But
at the same Murkomen, I picked you from the streets and made you the senator.
Come on,
I used to give you money every week, and you know that.
You know, don't lie.
My wife used to support you every week.
Don't make lies.
Because you come from the same region. So you must also respect us. So we are not psychopaths.
I think we are digressing into others.
Yeah. You remember I used to support you every week when you're going to Arambes.
Right, now that you brought that issue.
And even the M-Pesa, still the records are there.
Relax. Okay. Don't lie.
Even the first car I bought for you, you remember? The Harrier that you used to campaign. So, my brother, respect the elders.
I'm actually torn. I don't know whether to let all this go on.
Respect the elders.
I'm just trying to...
Gentlemen, we had Hussein Mohammed going. He doesn't know whether to stop them or let them keep going. Macharia, what do you think he should have done in that particular instance?
I think he was in a very, very difficult position. But it was great drama. But it is more stuff for maybe a reality show rather than serious political debate. Because really, I would say it was unacceptable the way they are throwing accusations and insults at each other. But we can also take it that from a legal standpoint, the moment they sit there together and agree to throw accusations at each other, no one is going to sue the other one for libel.
Okay. Sekou, this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Okay. Macharia is making a very important point, that once none of them is going to sue the other. The only problem is they never sue each other. It's the media house they come from. They both come from. And that's where the risk really is. But I don't think I can say anything about the way Hussein handled it. As Macharia rightly puts it, he was in a very difficult position because some of these people are you just don't know, and that's the risk, I think, with the live shows.
Live shows are always a risk, but I think before you go on air, it is important to, especially when you know the protagonists are likely to misbehave, it is important to set the ground rules. And I think you do have to, as an anchor, you do have to be very firm, if necessary, put off a mic if necessary. It may, sometimes it may have to come to that. As we go on with this kind of conversations, then we will have to look at that there will be times when you need those interventions.
Okay. Yeah. All right. David, what's your assessment?
Well, I've watched 2 TV shows, one in South Africa and another I think is in Asia, where the debaters went for each other and fought furiously on live TV until they fell down. In another case, another one draws a gun against the other one. So it can get very hard. But the challenge now is for the media to imagine that this is the platform for people to exchange. So we've had cases where I previously, sorry, where we had people who would go quarrel because they knew there was a live camera somewhere in a hotel. They would go quarrel, then they would come to the camera and draw words and all that. Then they check the TV, see that it's live, then they would come before the camera and make that noise. So the media has been reduced to providing a platform. It's like outside your house is where people know where they will come and fight because they know they won't get a chance to fight in the other place, and so in your house they will come and fight. So we have guys who know we have no facts, but we feel like shouting at each other we go and fight. So it's a question of the media now. Are we going to continue providing such a platform? So unless you consistently set an agenda and it be known that certain behavior will not be tolerated in the media platforms, people will continue knowing that, why don't you go and have some exchange on TV? It's going to be now where children go to throw allegations and not provide any support and all that. But if it is clearly known that there is a red line, I know the people who speak about red lines don't follow them much, but if it's clearly known that there is a red line established by the media houses, people will start to consistently know that don't go to TV if you're not organized. You will either be cornered live on screen or you'll not be allowed back because you have lowered the dignity of a media house. Because what we're seeing now is, well, let's say some pigs have no dignity anyway. I am not addressing anyone in particular. But now they look around for someone else to smear the mud already on their skin with. And the people now who are losing dignity are the media houses for providing an opportunity to the people who don't have much dignity to do that. And that is an issue that really calls for self-reflection. Okay. And I know Macharia is still the patron of the Editors Guild. It's about, as we make the decisions about people who have spoken, what is the effect on us if we keep allowing everybody to come and make allegations and not substantiate and get away with it? We call them again tomorrow and all that. What is it? What does it imply about ourselves that we tolerate any?
Okay, and I'll come back to that. But Macharia, before we forget about the sidebar interview, Ken Mijungu asked the MP, "You're asking me to go. Why didn't you go to the Register of Companies?" And the MP made a statement to the effect that my word as an MP should be good enough. Do you think Ken Mijungu went far enough in holding him to account?
First of all, a correction. I am not the patron of the Editors Guild. I am a trustee. Okay. Yes, I saw Ken Mijungu try to prod the MP to come up with evidence. The MP's explanation, of course, is nonsensical, that his word can be taken. I mean, the very fact that he's an MP makes his word very suspicious. This being Kenya. Ken probably could have prodded him further, and he could have come out with a disclaimer on air that these are unverified allegations. But then, NTV then owes its viewers a duty to follow up, go to the Register of Companies, and come up with the facts. Okay. Instead of leaving it hanging. All right. And I think that's what we should all be doing, not just NTV, but all of us in the media. That when these allegations are made, even if we can't get the first thing is to challenge the fellow to substantiate. The second one is for us ourselves to establish the facts.
Okay. All right. Seku, what do you think of how Ken Mijungu did at that particular point in that interview?
Yeah, I agree with Macharia that generally, I think he went as far as he could have in challenging them. And perhaps I would say that if many more people, if we made it a habit to challenge them the way Ken did, then we'd be doing our readers, I mean our audiences, not just readers, I would say the viewers there, the service that we owe them, and then put them on notice that, look, these facts will be checked. Even if I'm unable to establish them now, I will get them substantiated, and our viewers will get to know the truth.
Okay.
Yes.
David?
Having put them on notice, what are the consequences if we find that you're lying? That is where now the pig smears you, the host, with the mud on them. That we will check, and if we find that you will come on our TV and lie, we will call you again tomorrow on another topic. Let it be known that there are consequences for coming on our platform and spewing either hatred or lies and not doing anything about it. My concern is the dignity of the media now, then the dignity of the individual journalist being lowered because you allow people to make those allegations and they know that they can come and repeat them and there will be no consequences because of this right to information, or that we are going to give everybody fair chance and all that. So the guys who speak the truth are given fair chance, and the guys who speak lies are given fair chance. The person who advocates for abstinence and treatment for HIV/AIDS is given a fair chance. The prophet who pretends to heal HIV/AIDS is given a fair chance in the name of balance. That is a critical issue that the media must take. Otherwise, the whole issue about, suddenly if you look at the social media, there's a lot of blame about what the media does and all that. It's just because of the people who are supposed to stop and not given a chance are continuously being given time airtime and space in our platforms. That now then lowers, because if you allow a charlatan in your space, you're equal to that charlatan, unless you quickly give a disclaimer and push them out. Otherwise, you're getting a level where you are comparing a doctor and a village affect medicine in the name of balance. That is something that we must continuously deal with.
Okay, Macharia, do we deliberately, as media, sometimes pit people who will go against, go for each other's throats? Do we deliberately put them on the same platform so that either they provide that entertainment value or that shock and awe? And also, even if you look at the newspapers, so so-and-so said this, and I will think about who I will get to respond from the other side and find somebody who is perhaps very vocal and is no holds barred. Do we do that deliberately in some instances so that we have good TV, quote unquote, and good reading?
Let's be honest, good TV is drama. And again, it would be not make much sense to have two people on a panel who are simply in agreement with each other. So they have to be on opposite sides. Secondly, there must be people who are, apart from just knowing their subject, there must be people who are a bit vocal and who can talk and who can speak up for themselves or for their masters, whoever their masters are. That's a reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So suppose, are you saying therefore, back to the example I said, we bring a doctor, I won't mention any, a doctor from Nairobi Hospital to discuss to us about HIV and pneumonia, and we bring one of the very nice pastors or charlatans from down street Nairobi.
But is that a fair example?
That is not a good example at all.
But yes, I am asking that because someone says the only treatment for HIV/AIDS, for example, is but you must take ARVs and all that, isn't it?
No,
someone says, come to my church and I'll
I think the two situations are vastly different.
Yeah. But you can't find two doctors with diametrically opposed views on a mode of treatment.
Yes, so my point is,
leave alone the charlatan. If you want to, then we can also get two charlatans to face off against each other.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Seku. Yes. Sorry, David is one who was making the point that if somebody has consistently lied on national television or to a newspaper journalist or even to our online journalists, that we cross them off the list and we say, okay, we are no longer going to entertain this person. Do we have such a list as nation?
Yes, we did. At some point, we had such a list where we said there were people who are not necessarily that we whatever, but we blacklisted them and we considered them a lightning rod. We said this is a person whom we must treat with caution, whatever he tells us. So that if we were to check it twice, when it comes to this person, we check it 3 or 4 times. Okay. So we have that kind of list of certain people who, because of repeated instances of making statements we thought were irresponsible or otherwise too outlier and unverifiable, you then say, when it comes to so-and-so, take caution in light of what you get from him or her.
Okay.
Yes.
And what advice does your department give when an anchor, of course, we know we promo these interviews before we run or we go on air with them, and you expect a heated conversation. What advice do you give the anchor?
My advice to the anchor, first, as Macharia said, and actually this is not even advice for me, it's in our editorial policy, NMG's editorial policy, that when you have that, set the ground rules. In fact, you're required often to send a copy of the editorial policy to every guest you're inviting for the first time. And if he's somebody who's a repeat guest, you need to send a reminder and tell him, look, this is whatever, we do not expect you to go beyond the editorial policy. We want you to try and make the debate sober, be as open as you can, be as vocal as you can, but make it sober, and remember that we are doing this on behalf of our audiences. Okay? So that needs to be. And the objectives of the editorial policy are also in some abridged form is highlighted for them. Okay. That is a requirement within the editorial promise. It's basically a promise we make to our audiences that, look, this is what you should expect from our shows or from any content that we generate.
All right.
So that is what I would remind them and tell them, look, just remind these people that we have an editorial policy. This is the promise we make. That is what distinguishes us from every other media house.
All right.
Yes.
The person viewing does not know what that editorial policy says. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things somebody who is hosting very vocal guests should be careful about?
First of all, that they do not make statements that they cannot substantiate. Or they be aware that if they make a statement that they are unable to substantiate, they will be challenged on it. on air like Ken Mijungu was doing, that they should also be generally compliant with the law. We do not expect them to come and make defamatory statements about everyone. And this is an assurance, therefore, that, look, we don't expect you to defame anybody else. We don't expect you to make inflammatory statements about anybody. We don't expect you to do anything else that would cause a conflict with the laws. And in the same way, we are assuring you that all the other guests will also behave well. Okay? So we give them what we would call equality of arms. That what we expect of you, we can also assure you that you will not suffer that kind of maltreatment.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, when we come back, David, because I want us to take a very short break, I wanted you to tell us, do you monitor these interviews and what are you checking off on your list? All right. Welcome back. You're watching Press Pass. My name is Olive Burrows, and with me in studio is David Omoyo, Media Council of Kenya CEO and Secretary. Next to him is Seku Owino, who's the head of Legal Affairs Nation Media Group. And next to Seku is Macharia Gaido, prolific writer and former managing editor for The Nation. Well, gentlemen, before we went on the break, we're discussing how the media holds politicians to account for their statements. And we're looking at interviews, and we listened to a side-by interview in which Ken Mijungu took his honorable, the Chengani MP, Joshua Kutuni, to task over some allegations he made. Now, David, I wanted you to tell us from the point of view of the Media Council, when you watch these interviews, what are you looking for?
Of course, we look for the basics: objectivity, balance, professionalism, and making sure that there are no, inflammatory statements and all that. They are very basic. They are the minimum requirements of any professional media interview. But we have cases where then you have like prescripted interview questions where somebody comes on board and then you realize that this looks like it was already a pre-planned, and I know especially now in the days of very squeezed commercial space, therefore now we try to look at bias, whether this was a prescripted interview passing as news and all that. And in a cautionary note we have sent to one media house, we felt that a certain show that passed as a news show was really a commercial, it was really a paid for commercial, so that you make it look like a Q&A and it is commercial. We have no problem with that because we have many influencers coming across to promote even the maiden flight, the airport and all that. The problem is when you market something as a news show and a primetime news bulletin and then give pieces and bits of that to influencers where it is then paid for. Some of these things, unfortunately, are perceptive. You have to really look and analyze and then say, this does not look like really a news interview. It was a promotional interview paid for and all that. So we look for the standards, and then, and because now again, when you look, there's like for the past 3 months, apart from one case, we had no case of basic violation. Like mainstream media is really professional. But then now you start looking at biases and influences that you think are not objective and all that, which are also very tricky to measure. And that's why at the beginning of the show I said, we are now staring at beyond the code of conduct, we're looking at capacity. Because then when you have the issues of capacity, then you have perception of the community that we are providing a platform for pigs to play. Now we start losing the credibility as the media. And that is of more concern to us. It has come, we have shared our concerns with the Editors Guild. We have received that in a very comprehensive report from the judges of Ajaya, who told us they are extremely concerned about the standards of journalism based on the entries that were put across. Now we are talking about capacity, develop critical minds, and be able to engage and allow the young and experienced journalists to really learn that the world is changing, and the way we do a few things is important, because then when people start perceiving media differently, there is less trust, and then people start looking for other sources, or suddenly there's a lot of condemnation to media and the conduct. So it's beyond, we are at the level where, apart from extremely isolated cases, especially mainstream media, we can't identify straight cases of breaches of the conduct and all that. What we look at capacity issues, we think that that story is a little too shallow. This guy should have dug a little deeper and all that. And it's now a challenge. We are at the level of capacity development and all that. Basic violations of the code have gone really down. Apart from now, many smaller media houses that have come up that are being run mostly by politicians and their proxies that have not learned that the capacity is low.
Okay. Yeah. Sekou, I'd like you to comment on what David said about sponsored interviews. I know if something is in the paper or online and it's paid for, there would generally be an indication that this is sponsored content. Does the same happen with television?
It should. It should, because you know, what we say for NMG, at least in terms of speaking now back to our editorial policy, everything that is sponsored content ought to be designated as such, and the audience needs to know that this is not what we would call otherwise editorial news content. So it should be.
It should be.
Yes.
All right.
Because
have you found that to be the case?
But is it?
Masharia, have you found that to be the case? And also, if you could weigh in on what David said as you comment about that, what he said about Ajaya voicing concerns about, what did you say, the quality of the entries?
The quality of journalism and entries across board.
Okay.
Having gone deep into that.
Let me put it, when I was at Daily Nation, and I think that it is still the practice today, advertising must be clearly distinguishable from editorial content. And where it needs to be made clear, then there will be advertisers' announcements or sponsored content or whatever. And but with TV, I think the boundaries tend to be blurred. These rules are being flouted, and those are our own rules, the Media Council rules. On radio, it disturbs me a great deal when somebody is reading news on the radio or engaging the normal chit-chat of some talk show. The same person, in the middle of his broadcast, turns to an advertising end. Mogoda, buy a plot in Roy, whatever. You know, first of all, it's completely unethical. And I think these are the things which would be so easy for Media Council to pick up, because they're happening on nearly all radio stations, where the anchor is also pitching various things, and there is not for the reader. It becomes very difficult to distinguish which was the news and which was the advert, and really there should be a very clear divide.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the concerns raised by the AJIA judges over the quality of entries?
There is I would agree. I think when we look at, I've not been an AJIA judge, but I've seen the quality of the things that have been shortlisted, and even from where I say some of this surely shouldn't have been shortlisted. Maybe we need to look at sometimes how those competitions are done, because often it is people nominating themselves. So you will find it is not always the best works that are being nominated. It is not always the best journalists that are being nominated. It is only those who bother to nominate themselves or their colleagues nominate them. In the newsroom, when I was there used to be a constant joke about what we used to call award-winning journalists, because we knew they're winning awards, but they do not necessarily deserve it. It is just that they're the only ones who bothered to enter those awards, as simple as that.
Okay, so you don't think it's a reflection on the overall quality of journalism in the country?
It does reflect on the overall quality of journalism. But also, we also need to look at the way we do some of these competitions to make sure that if you're talking about a national competition of this nature, then all entries, or rather all works that deserve, get nominated. So you don't leave it for people to nominate themselves. Perhaps you could look at a panel which, in addition to what you might call self-nominations or wananchi nominations or whatever other nominations, that there is an expert panel of editors and others who will also have gone through the newspapers and listened to the radio and TV for that year and decided these works must be must be looked at. Okay. Maybe we need to do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, one more political statement made over the course of the last few weeks that I'd like us to discuss. And this statement was made by the Mani National Congress party leader, Musalia Mudavadi.
The latest such salvo coming from ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, whose veiled reference could not conceal his obvious target.
Ikiwa Safaricom is the richest, inawezekana namna gani mimi mtu mmoja natoa pesa kila weekend, kila pahali, kushinda hata Safaricom?
Okay, gentlemen, you've heard, I'm sure it's been played and replayed over and over again, and there have been a lot of reactions to that. There was also a certain video that I didn't find any particular media house having shared, and that is of the Deputy President allegedly responding to this statement by Musalia Mudavadi. But David, you were saying before the break, during the break, that is fake news?
I think that the hurry to break news has made us lose the context, because I know one blogger who picked the Deputy President speaking and said he has referred to people who take whiskey until morning and they have no money to give. Yet the truth is that the Deputy President was at a function where one of the speakers before him seems to have provoked him when he said that the businessmen, please bring your money. There was those who were employed, bring your money, and the thieves, please bring your money. So naturally, if there is that a context in a fundraiser, it was for Shabana FC, it is very natural for somebody to quit back and all that. So a blogger suddenly said that when the DP spoke, that the DP has said, Mudavadi, you drink until this time and you will have no money and all that. And you see now that seems to be what everybody has picked. Yet I don't think that at that time the DP was responding to what happened before. He must have been talking in that context, because similar sentiments or like related sentiments were made. So that also takes us back to, in this era of social media, remember social media is a platform, it's very easy for us sitting in these mainstream media studios to pick what a blogger picked. Like I think it's a blogger who thought that the DP was addressing Mudavadi. I do not think that contextually speaking, the DP was addressing Mudavadi in that particular clip that we've watched here.
Right.
So that goes back to verification. Don't assume. Some things look rather straightforward. Don't assume, contextualize, and then you find that this was a longer
clip.
The interesting thing is that, yes, it was a blogger who associated whatever the deputy president said with an attack on Mudavadi. I am not sure whether the mainstream media picked up that in terms of attributing it, instead of in terms of saying it, the DP was referring to Mudavadi. At least if they have, I have not seen.
At least I picked it here when we spoke here.
Yeah. But the thing is that our politics played at a very funny way, because even when Musalia Mudavadi spoke about, and it's not the first time he has said it, about this somebody who goes to church and gives out money which needs to be investigated. I didn't hear him mention the deputy president.
No, he did, and he made the point after I think we ran
but obviously some
he made the point that I didn't say DP.
Yeah, but obviously some people were rattled and assumed he's speaking about them.
Yes, because he was responded to.
Looking at some blogs and various discussion groups, I've seen the vice president's people hitting back at Mudavadi and saying blah blah blah. So they already, without being prompted, they assumed it's him they're speaking about. That is interesting.
Yes.
Okay, and I appreciate the context, because even I went there. Seku, Mudavadi made the point that of course, the DP Ruto's people responded, and he made the point that I never came out and said this, I'm talking about DP Ruto. He never mentioned the DP anywhere. Did he have a point as the media? Should we have put together those dots, or should we not have names?
I don't know why we want to put words in his mouth. I think the easier thing is to ask him, you've been talking about this thing. Who is it you're talking about? That's, for me, sitting in my armchair journalism, I would think is what we need to do to bring an end to this thing.
Okay.
Who is this you keep talking about everywhere you go?
Okay,
is
so
it one person or several
if we write our intros, let's say for the particular package that you saw, and we say Amani National Congress leader hit back, or put the DP William Ruto on the spot, and then you go and listen to the clip and Mudavadi never actually said DP Ruto or said William Ruto, is that a mistake? Or is it at the point where it is common knowledge anyway?
Common knowledge. I always say common knowledge is not a defense. Now, if I was to speak as a lawyer, common knowledge is not going to be a defense to us, because if the DP comes and were to take us to task for that, then you're not going to say that it is common knowledge, because you will be in trouble. You're going to have to prove it's common knowledge, and you're going to have whose common knowledge is it? Because the DP say, if it's common knowledge, it's not common knowledge to me that you are, or somebody else will come and do that. So you'll find yourself in trouble. I think this is the kind of thing, especially if a legal liability was to arise from it, is to bury the point by simply saying, look, who is this you're talking about? And that if he's not willing to talk about somebody, then we may need to give context that he was unwilling to disclose who he was talking about. And that way you're safer than running blind on something with an assumption.
Rather than connecting the dots.
Yes.
Mashaya, you don't look quite so convinced.
Of course, it's good to seek clarification from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But even when the horse is unwilling to state, to say who is his target, I think as an editor, as a journalist, I have to do some interpretative journalism. I can't get away from that. And we do have to connect the dots and say he was probably referring to so and so, or even go further and say he could only have been referring to so and so. And that's perfectly legitimate.
Right.
And it happens with our political discourse a lot, because every time, even the president or the deputy president or the opposition leader, they sit on they go up on a public platform with their off-the-cuff remarks, and they'll make certain statements. And we would look very foolish if we went to town the following day without trying to say who he's talking about, because sometimes it is so clear. And we must be able to reach our conclusions. Sometimes, okay, the problem is when you get it wrong. So the problem is when you get it wrong, and sometimes we do get it wrong. But most of the times, I think it's quite clear. And even the audiences are clear anyway who the target is, because we already know the history, the context, and we should be able to justify why we think this was the person being talked about.
Okay. David, was it clear for you in this particular instance when you heard that statement?
Well, that is a personal opinion, which I won't give. But I will give this analogy. In class 5, there was a story in a class debate where someone spoke and someone tells them, "Thank you for telling us nothing." So that by trying to protect us from the law and not make perceptions and all that, you make sure you refer to an unnamed politician from a region and all that, so that we have filled airtime and airspace without naming anyone. And so what has happened is that we end up being legal. We have not mentioned anyone, as Seku will say, and then we have not provided any information. What that does is the issue of legality and legitimacy. You have not broken any law, but everybody thinks you are a joker. Perception then comes in. So it's a level where, as Mashere says, you have to make decisions. So what we are seeing continuously is the media, as I said, in the name of trying to balance, bring everybody on board, don't mention names, don't make allegations, make it protected. We have a lot of time speaking about a topic, nobody is mentioning names, no concrete figures, no specific dates, no individuals mentioned, and that's where now you reduce to that credibility issue. The class 5 remark, there was a lot of nothing in the many words because of that, trying to make sure that you stick to the narrow that is safe. And it is a bold decision that has to be made, that people, you either have facts or you keep quiet and play music.
Macharia, in conclusion, we start winding up this discussion, but do you agree with what David has to say?
Yes, I agree. I think we are on the same page, that we cannot pretend we don't know what is being talked about. There is something we used to do a lot at Nation one time, where there's because you don't want to inflame or provoke situations. So there's a conflict somewhere. And we don't want to say who is in the conflict. So we say a certain community. And I always used to argue, everybody knows what is happening. Why are we afraid to say that it is this community who is in a conflict with this community? Even when we say a certain community, who are we lying to? And I think we have to come out with these things. Sometimes too much sweeping things under the carpet does not help. And the other thing also had to do with those things of reporting, what you might call reporting hate speech. There's a time we were so afraid of repeating what politicians are saying, that in my view we were covering up for them, which means a politician would go to a certain location and tell people, chase away these outsiders. So we don't report it, but the local community has got the message. And one time at Nation we made a decision, no, we will not cover up for them, we will expose them. And when we started doing that, the politicians actually started misbehaving, because they realized that we are no longer going to hide behind saying nothing, that if they make intolerable statements on the public platform, they will be exposed.
We'll expose them.
Yeah.
All right. Seku, what are your concluding remarks on this particular subject?
Okay, what I would want to say is that all these things have, I am one person who thinks, okay, first we need to do this, but the truth is we also need to call up people for what they do and to be clear about what we are saying to the whatevers. But again, it doesn't help us too much, because at the end of the day, the bulk of these things, and at least where I sit in the legal department, the bulk of these things end up in lawsuits, which end up in liabilities if we lose, and money we are asked to pay. And at that particular point, those people for whom we were saying they do not want to hear nothing are the ones who laugh at you and say, look at this kind of judgment that has been given about you. They're the ones who will call you names in terms of all these media. So the call for me is never what people will think. The call for us is, do we have the facts that we are talking about? Okay? Are we safe enough to do it? Rather than do it so that people don't think we are cowards, and then eventually we have a huge judgment of millions we are sitting on. Those same people for whom we did this are the ones who will laugh at us. So the call always is, just get it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get it right the first time.
Yeah.
All right. David, your concluding remarks?
I think the media must be bold. If you don't want to annoy anyone, you can join PR and do some good work where you don't annoy everybody and you please everyone. Because if you're going to say we can't mention, we'll be taken to court, this looks this way, we cannot mention and all that, eventually you become an extension of a public relations agency, or they call them public communications arms. The media, they say that the journalism is the art of publishing what someone does not want to be published. Everything else is public relations. So if you're going to publish only matters that will not annoy anybody and matters which will not make people take you to court, then really it's up to you. I know of a newspaper in this country which publishes the most scandalous things that ever happened, but nobody takes. I think they have 2 court cases, while other very reputable newspapers have 15. The reason being, they publish and you dare them, they tell you we have more. They collect their information, and it is one. When I saw the facts, I could not believe it, because it's something you expect that the people would have been lynched on the road, but they do that. So when we now get that afraid and ensure we are very legal and protected, we lose that legitimacy, and it's a risk that we are facing, whereby people say that when you see this, when we expect a certain blogger to tell us the truth, not the media house. It's really a crisis, and that boldness. You want to serve public interest, or abandon the streets of journalism altogether, and engage in something else.
Maybe I can add to what he's saying. One concept we have never really tested in Kenya when it comes to label and defamation is that often it has to do with the reputation of somebody. I've seen cases in the US and the UK and many other places where a newspaper is sued. Yes, it is found it libeled somebody, but the claimant is awarded $1 because the court finds that he has no reputation to protect anyway. So there was no. It's about reputation. Yes, what you reported may have been incorrect, but you have not damaged his reputation because it is already damaged.
He had no reputation.
And I remember before I joined Nation, I was with the Economic Review. We used to have a lot of libel cases, and we also had and those were the days when, of course, everybody used to sue the powerful politicians of the day. Were always suing us. One thing we made sure is that we get our facts right. The other thing was that we made sure that even if we don't have all the facts, that they're not something which that fellow can easily challenge. And our standard response was, somebody writes a letter, our standard response was, let's meet in court. And 99 times out of 100, they never followed up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll look at what's on the international radar now, and then we'll come back and look at some of the responses to the conversation we've been having. The leaders of the world's largest economies opened talks on Friday at a 2-day Group of 20 Nations summit in Buenos Aires, Argentina. However, the presence of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman posed a awkward dilemma for leaders, with Prince Mohammed arriving under the swirling controversy over the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2.
The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman cut a lonely figure standing at the edge of the G20 family photo on Friday. Prince Mohammed could be seen standing at the far edge of the group portrait and outrightly being ignored by the other leaders as they prepared to take their places in the family photo. The Crown Prince quickly exited the stage without shaking hands or talking with other leaders. The Saudi Crown Prince is under intense scrutiny following the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. On the sidelines, US President Donald Trump has stood by the Crown Prince, saying he does not want to jeopardize US business and defying intense pressure from lawmakers to impose broader sanctions on Saudi Arabia. Russian President Vladimir Putin seemed to be the only leader to openly warm up to the Crown Prince at the summit. The two were seen exchanging a high five and a handshake and laughing heartily as they took their seats next to each other in the main meeting room. Russia has refrained from criticizing Saudi Arabia or the Crown Prince over the killing. Putin said in October he lacked information about the matter and said Russia would not tear up its relations with Saudi Arabia because of it. On his part, French President Emmanuel Macron said that he told Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that G20 nations wanted clarity on the facts of the Khashoggi case. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, speaking on the same, said he had a frank conversation with Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the G20 leaders' dinner and told him Canada would only stand up for human rights. British Prime Minister Theresa May told the Saudi Crown Prince that he should take action to prevent the recurrence of incidents like the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The Crown Prince was on his first tour abroad since the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The Saudi prince has maintained he had no prior knowledge of the murder.
So some of your thoughts on our subject matter today. We have a gentleman by the name of Jacob Bere Matlala who says the media fraternity threw manners out the window a long time ago. They would rather highlight stories about a politician fixing electricity in a grass house than air the numbers of bills that have been presented on the floor of Parliament. Then we have another gentleman here who says some of the headlines in our mainstream media do not have facts. Why should you publish information without investigations? There's a gentleman who just says Githeri media. But that's been a common accusation that we've faced. Yes, somebody else says the media fraternity are good at covering gossip on pages 2 and 5. Sorry, in 2 pages or 5 minutes, and about TV stories. So, okay, this needs some editing, but basically he seems to believe that we carry stories about politicians seen with slay queens rather than covering stories of teen pregnancy in the country. Do you think those comments are fair, gentlemen? Masharia?
Let me put it this way. As media, we put our mistakes on the headlines for everybody to look at and digest and condemn us or praise us for that matter. And I always, everybody has an opinion on how we do things and how we should not do things. And I always give the analogy of being in a football stadium. Everybody there has got all the advice for the players and the coach on what they should be doing and not doing. But he's a spectator. He's not a footballer, yeah. But he seems to know better than the guys on the pitch and better than the coach and everybody else. And that is the situation I think we sometimes find ourselves in, because everybody who reads, who watches, has an opinion on how we should have done it. As simple as that.
All right.
Some of these complaints, of course, are genuine. They cannot be ignored. As media, we cannot ignore the views of our viewers and listeners. But a lot of it is maybe either misinformed or based on some preconceived notions. Okay. Sometimes even it is based on political or other loyalties, and that is how readers will respond to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Sekou and David will have to end the show there. But those comments remind me of those made by Michelle Obama as she's been promoting her book, Becoming, and she said everybody thought they could give the president advice, and yet they would never dare to tell a dentist how to do his job. Well, there you have it. That brings Press Pass to an end. Thank you for staying and watching.